Hello and welcome. My name is Grimdark James of the Grimdark Podcast, and this is a GM prep for Rogue Trader the Last Scion on the AP Gaming Reel channel. If you're not familiar with the show, then this is probably a bad episode to start watching on. You can find all the episodes of the show up until now on the AP Gaming Reel YouTube site, which you're probably on right now. And catch up there, find out about the show, and then if you're still interested in finding more about the GM prep, then please come back to this video. Uh, this is going to be a spoiler-free GM prep. So what I'm not going to be doing here is going through the storyline or the background or what's going to happen to the PCs within the context of the game. What I'm going to be talking about here is the mechanical setup for I guess, the final major confrontation of the first story arc. So I've already discussed this to a degree with the players. They know what this is leading up towards. They know how we're going to actually deliver it. And so this is me just basically putting down my thoughts onto paper or onto the computer, and I thought I'd share it with the audience just for those who are interested in how this all comes together. So if you have been watching the show until now, you're probably familiar with the fact that the big event sort of beginning to transpire is that a Necron fleet is making their way towards the world of Regina 4, where the PCs have previously unearthed or have found ancient Necron ruins beneath a crashed Imperial ship, which they have not yet explored as at the time of recording this. And the Necrons basically want what is in that facility for themselves. And while the PCs and NPCs have been able to string along the Necrons so far with promises of giving them the world in exchange for technologies, the fact of the matter is that at some point or other this is going to come to a head and a conflict is going to ensue. And to this end, so far the players have been able to wrangle some base forces. I'm just showing on the screen right now. You should be able to see the Roll20 screen that we utilize, and these are things that the players could normally see. But I've basically given them 4 faction sheets that sort of show the available factions right now. So if I run through these, initially the Sororitas faction was a bit different when it was just being operated by the NPC Sister Miriam. Now that Dave is playing Sister Dawn, I have sort of updated this somewhat. So the idea here is that the Adeptus Sororitas are prepared to provide elements of their Abbey and Preceptory from the Calixis sector to the aid of the PC, should they be called. So first off, I decided to, when designing these forces or when designing these options, base it entirely around power level rather than points. There's a couple of reasons for this. First off is that with 9th edition coming out soon, and I can guarantee that 9th edition will be out before we actually run through this part of the game, given it comes out in a week's time as of the time of recording, and we're still several games away from the final conclusion. Anyway, going back to, in 9th edition, the power levels of units from 8th edition are pretty much entirely unchanged. In fact, the power levels, very few power levels changed at all in the entire run of 8th edition, whereas the points values fluctuated in and out based upon things like chapter approved books, new codexes, etc. But the power level stuffs remain relatively consistent. Secondly, power level removes a lot of the granularity. So you can basically pick whatever weapon options you want, whatever sort of setups you want for most models, without that actually changing the power level. So a 5-man Marine tactical squad with just bolt guns has the same power level as the same squad where the sergeant has a combi melter and one of the Marines is given a missile launcher. Where that would actually change the points value, the power level doesn't change. So what I've said is, so looking at the Sororitas faction sheet here, for example, I've said initially the group can muster 20 points or 20 power level worth of Sororitas forces. And then I've also limited it down to what particular options are available. So, for example, I have it included, let's just say, penitent engines. So penitent engines are not currently something the group could actually field, but they could field up to 20 points worth of everything else that's shown here. So the Canoness, and I put only one because there is only one Canoness in the Calixis sector. We've got Missionary, Battle Sister Squads, Dialogus, Hospitaller, Magifier, Preacher, Repentia, Dominions, Exorcists, Retributors, Immolators, and Rhinos. So pretty much your standard Sisters force. Really all that stands out that's not standard Sisters is the Missionary and the Preacher. Now, I know that there are rules within 8th edition that basically say if your unit or if your army, for example, has only Sororitas, then you have access to things like the Faith abilities. Same way that if it's only Marines, it has access to things like Doctrines. Although it's not strictly within the rules of 40k from a narrative point of view, I'm allowing those things even though the group will field a mixed army. So they'll still be able to use things like the Doctrine, they'll still be able to use the Faith abilities of the Battle Sisters if they choose to do that. So, say for example, they were to develop out their relationship with the Adeptus Sororitas further. We can then open this up to other units, like for example, Celestians haven't been included. They're sort of the peak of skill of the Sororitas. Mentioning before things like Penitent Engines. There's not a lot of things in the Sororitas list which aren't included here, mainly because it's not a very developed codex. I suppose we could be putting in things like Seraphim or Zephyrim, which are the sisters that use jump packs to get into combat as well. So it really just comes down to whether the group wants to spend time developing their relationship with the Sisters of Battle, which would either lead to more power level available or more units available, or both, depending on how I feel it's actually working out. Okay, so going into the AdMech. So the AdMech stuff here was based upon the fact originally we did have a tech priest or an explorator character within the group. That changed around, but still the group had made ends towards improving their relationship with the Mechanicus, including providing the servitor that was in contact with the Necrons to the Mechanicus to get data out of, including things like the STC for the Damocles class Rhino engine. And so I have given them 20 power level worth of Mechanicus forces here, but it is highly limited. It's really just effectively Tech Priest HQs, Skataran troops, Sakaran elites, and then a couple of tank options. So basically the Onaga Crawler, which is a standard three-legged tank, and the Scorpius Doom Rider, which is the hover transport that the Skatari use. So realistically speaking, a relatively basic force, but 20 points nonetheless. Okay, next up is a bit different. So I put in Astra-Militarum here. Now, this could be considered to be the actual Imperial Guard. It could be considered to be mercenaries, whatever the case may be. Effectively, this is just the standardized fighting forces. And so what I said is whenever they decide to muster forces for a battle, they can basically have a power level equal to their current profit factor, which right now in the game is 45. Let's assume it might get to something like 50 or so by the time we get to the end of the first story arc. So they'll be able to pull together about 50 PL worth of forces here. Now, I have kept it to basic stuff. Obviously, no named characters. I've left named characters out entirely, although there will be named characters. They will just be named versions of the standard data sheets that are relating to particular NPCs from the game. So commanders, tank and field commander, infantry squads, and then your basic command squads, platoon commanders, support staff like engineers, veterans. I did put Rough Riders in. I thought that was a more interesting option for fast attack, but also the Scout Sentinels. Heavy supports limited to Basilisks, Hydras, Leman Russes, and Wyverns. And then I also put in the Arbor Slider and Valkyries plus the transports. So, for example, no Militarum Tempestus. I have laid the seeds of accessing the Militarum Tempestus through the NPC Peck or Oswald, who has since left the Hand of Calixis to join the Militarum Tempestus. So, while I don't think that'll resolve itself within the current story arc, that's, I guess, a future option to bring in the Militarum Tempestus from Maccabeus Quintus in the Calixis sector in the future, based upon that relationship that Nero developed with Oswald during his time on the Hand of Calixis. But certainly there are extra things that could be brought in to build this out. So things like Hellhounds, Armored Sentinels, even down to if they wanted to eventually get access to things like super heavy tanks, if there was really a risk of a titanic threat. There's a lot of different data sheets in the Astra Militarum list, so I really have kept it quite limited here, just so as not to bombard the group with, I guess, too much choice and therefore paralysis by analysis too. So I know that Pondo from the group is working on lists already, and I think that this is where a lot of meat will come from, is a sort of 50 or so power level of Astra Militarum. And then finally, the big one is the Space Marine faction. So this was originally a lot more limited in terms of the Silver Skulls commitment to help out the group. So if you follow the show, you probably recall that at an earlier point in the show, the group found a bunch of former Silver Skulls, or was it Silver Skulls? Sorry, no, former Iron Warriors equipment on board the ship that they discovered, the Anvil of War, and it was all turned over to the Silver Skulls. They had the option of either um, effectively realizing a profit from this gear and therefore raising the profit factor, or else handing it over to the Silver Skulls and potentially gaining more support. They didn't know at the point what the increase would be, but it took them from 30 power level of Silver Skulls to 60 power level, and it's also added a lot more different datasheet options. So obviously this is all pre the Cicatrix Maledictum, so there's no Primaris forces anywhere here. Anything that's basically come in since the Dark Imperium box set, I've kept out of this what we're working on here, because it simply doesn't exist yet. It hasn't been invented yet, or if it is, it's flying about on Call's ship waiting to be pulled into the Imperium in a couple of 100 years' time. So a couple of these are named characters. So, for example, the Captain in Terminator armor has already appeared in some of the narrative element, and the Librarian in Terminator armor is the Librarian that the group has already dealt with, which is Viridius. I've also put in the Damocles Command Rhino because of the fact that the group managed to get that STC pattern in order to build newer engines for the Damocles class. I thought that was a nice little addition. I'm not necessarily saying that Damocles class Rhino is a good choice at 7 power level, but the option is there anyway. With troops basically limited to scout and tactical squads, that's a given that everything else in troops is all Primaris, so incursors, intercessors, etc. That's all Primaris. A lot of elites available, so things like the apothecary, the centurions, the company commands, veteran squads. Now, I've also put down here the veteran dreadnought, which is a one only. If the group does take that one, there's a bit of narrative element to that, which we'll come back to. I mean, you can probably guess what that'll be, but I'll just pretend there's a reason why veteran dreadnoughts are one only, other than the fact they're also very good. What else have we got? In the fast attack, all the basic bike squads and speeders. Heavy support, we've included things like Land Raiders, except for the Crusader, just the Redeemer and the main one are in there. Predators, Vindicators, Warbands, all the standard Marine tanks are in there. With the flyers as well, I've added in the Stormraven gunship and also the Xiphon Interceptors, which are normally a Horus Heresy only flyer, which actually appear in Imperial armor. I've included those there because they were among the things that were recovered from the Anvil of War and given over to the Silver Skull, so they've been repainted and they can be used if they want to. So they're a sort of cool narrative thing. Effectively, they're a fighter which is so advanced that only a Marine has the reflexes to pilot it. And then your standard transport option, so drop pod, Razorback, Rhino. So without going into all the really weirder stuff in the Marine list, pretty much most things are available to the group by way of this, although with some limitations where they're particularly advanced stuff. So the idea is effectively there are two companies of Silver Skulls that are able to help out the group, and so that's why I've included, for example, more than one captain here as well. I should probably have listed here, like, really speaking, you could say I want to take 4 captains, so 2 standard captains, 1 captain on Terminator armor and 1 on bike. The idea really is to just take 2 captains maximum across those, but no more than one of the second 2. But we'll leave that up to the group to actually work out. So 60 there, let's say 50 in the Astra Militarum, and then 20 each in the Sororitas and the Mechanicus, means we're looking at about 160 power level worth of total things, which is somewhere around a 3 to 3,500 point game, dependent upon how much you actually choose to put in there as well. And that, once again, that could potentially grow. The group doesn't have to use all these forces, but the option is there. So then it comes down to, how am I going to work around what the other side is going to look like? We know it's Necrons. Obviously, there's a lot more stuff for Necrons coming out with the new book or the new box set in a week's time. I am keeping it really to just what is available with the 8th edition Necrons, because obviously things like, we know the Silent King's coming back. The Silent King is obviously not coming back anytime soon in my game, given that several hundred years behind the current meta plot. Yeah, so a lot of the new forces from Indomitus, I'm going to not worry about this. Also because we're using TTS for the modeling, and a lot of these things don't exist in TTS yet, whereas everything which appears in the 8th edition Codex, I have available to me in TTS right now, thanks to a lot of hard work from the community. So there's two elements to how I want to sort of work towards a conclusion, or the big ending battle of the first story arc. The first part is that the Necron fleet has to actually reach Regina 4. And historically, there weren't early rules for Necron battle fleets in Battlefleet Gothic, but they did bring out a subsequent book for it. So if I just switch over to Acrobat. So this was the Harvest Fleets add-on for Battlefleet Gothic Armada, which shows Necron vessels. So there's not a lot of them, but if we come down, they've got some particular rules. So in terms of their weapons, they've got the Sepulchre, which effectively is a very powerful single attack weapon that drives the crew crazy, and it's only ever installed on effectively the lead ship in a Necron fleet. You've got the lightning arcs and the particle whips are their standard weapons. So lightning arcs, I believe, are roughly macro cannon equivalents, and particle whips are effectively similar to lancers. The Star Pulse Generator is effectively an AoE attack which originates from the ship that uses it and damages other ships. And then portals allow Necron ships effectively the equivalent of a teleportarium when it comes to actually doing hit and run attacks. And in terms of the actual ships, I'll come down here. There's a couple of elements here about the fact they use things like inertialess drives, which allows them to turn more freely. The reactive hulls mean they handle armor a bit differently. There was no mention of quantum shielding in this thing, but it does come up later on. So in terms of the ships, there is the Cairn class tomb ship, which is a larger ship. This is the only ship that can mount the Sepulchre as well. It's a battleship equivalent. In thinking about how I wanted to handle the assault on Regina 4, the idea was that I wanted to have a small, fast space battle that takes place first, and the results of the space battle will play into the results of the ground battle. So the idea is effectively that the Necron fleet is attempting to break the line of the Imperial defenders to reach the planet's surface. And if they lose any ships in the process, they then have less troops to land for the service battle. And so there's a few ways to do this. One way would be to say we're going to have, a 5 or 10 ship battle using the Rogue Trader rule set, which would be very slow. That could easily take 3 or 4 sessions on its own to resolve before we even get to the ground battle. The second option will be to actually utilize the Battlefleet Gothic system, which, while it's a good system, I don't really want to have to teach the players and get the audience to understand who don't know it, that system, for a single battle where there is already a ship battle system built into Rogue Trader, which is clearly derived from the system, but a lot faster when it's used for smaller actions. The next option was to focus on just what is the Hand of Calixis doing, and what are its opponents, which is probably my likely option. So while there might be multiple Necron ships, I'll probably say that some of them are tied up with the other Imperial ships that are assisting, and I'll work out in the back end what the result of that action looks like. So while it's tempting to go and bring in a Cairn class tomb ship, they are very rare. They're easy to match for things like a Space Marine battle barge, which the group does have. The Space Marine, Manifest Destiny, which is the battle barge of the Silver Skulls, will be available to the players for help. But I think that really the Cairn class is just too big a ship. The battleship is too large to pin into this battle. It would really sway things one way or the other. So I'll probably leave this one out, and that means locking out the Sepulchre. So that brings us down to the Scythe class, which is a cruiser, and there's also then the Shroud class, which is a light cruiser as well. So this is probably, I'll have one of these two ships in the fleet battle, and this will probably be what I will tie up the Space Marine battle barge with, and I'll have a look through and work out what this would look like in terms of a battle. But also the idea would be that the players might. So right now, the only ships that players have access to are the Hand of Calixis and the Manifest Destiny. But maybe the group might try to recover the Eternal Praetorian, crew that, and put it into the battle within that time. Maybe they might seek other assistance from those forces that they've already got ground forces from. They might be able to get one or more ships to help in the blockade of Regina 4. So we'll work out effectively where that's going to look. But I think that the Scythe class ship would be more than a match for the Hand of Calixis on its own. So really, if I'm going to type an NPC battle elsewhere, that'll be what I work out separately. Now, there's also then coming down the Raiders. So there's the Jackal class and the Dirge class, which are effectively smaller escort ships. And this is where I would actually look at putting up the PCs against one of these sort of classes of ship. Now, I was wondering first off whether somebody had actually done some work on incorporating Necron ships into Rogue Trader. And lo and behold, I found on the FFG forums back from 2012, a forum user by the name of Vandergraaf had actually gone and effectively taken all the information from the Necron Harvest Fleets booklet and turned it into Rogue Trader stats. So, for example, they put in quantum shielding now. So, for example, quantum shielding has a value, and any damage dice which does below that value is simply cancelled out. They've got in all the ships. So if we come down, we've got the Can class once again, the Scythe class. They've got the Reaper is a different one, which wasn't in there before. The Shroud class is in there. And then also the Jackal and the Dirge. So they're all in there as well. There were a couple of things. I read through it. For example, with the Star Pulse generator, they say that it doesn't affect the ship it originates from, but it says, but all other Necron ships and small craft in the area will suffer the full effects. Whereas if I go back to the PDF, you should see that if we come up, where it talks about the Star Pulse generator, it says it does not affect other Necron ships. So I'd probably take the original fluff over the fan-made fluff and say that if that is used in the game, I'm not going to have that affect other Necron ships. But in terms of what the Hand of Calixis can take on, I think that if we come down to the smaller ships, so the Reaper or the Jackal or the Dirge. So the Jackal is a frigate class, which is the same size class as the Hand. The Dirge is a Raider, which is one size smaller. The big thing about them is they're very fast, 12 speed versus 13 speed. Their hull integrity is relatively light, 32 and 40. And note they don't have shields. They do rely upon their quantum shielding, which is only a 2 on the Jackal and only a 2 on the Dirge as well. Meaning that when they are hit by the player's weapons, any damage dice that does a 1 or a 2 is ignored, which is only going to be 20% of the dice. The rest will all go through. And that, even when they were that low, they'd be only hitting the armor anyway, and probably not getting through the armor with that low roll. So I think this would make for an interesting, easy to clear through in the space of one session battle to put the Hand up against one of these classes of frigate, and effectively say that if they destroy this, then that pulls out a ground force. So once again, we're talking about 160 power level worth of player fieldable forces. My thought was to say, okay, if everything goes badly, no real damage is dealt in the space battle, or they choose not to blockade the Necrons at all and just face them on the planet, that the Necrons are going to land about 150 points worth. 150 power level, I should say. Which means that the PCs already have a 10 PL advantage before any additional forces they manage to recruit between now and the final battle. And that's by design, because at the end of the day, we're talking about not just a tabletop war game where you've got two sides vying for who's going to win. What you've got is a narrative component of which the PCs are the heroes. And while we want them to be challenged, we also want them to be victorious at the end of the day. So I apologize out there to any big Necron players, that your guys probably won't win this battle. It's really more down to what damage is done in the process. And there will be several named NPCs on the field, the loss of which may still be keenly felt. Now, if the players are able to take out their ship and prevent that ship, therefore, from landing its forces on Regina 4, then I'll probably drop the Necron forces down to about 100 PL, and thereby giving the players a roughly 30 to 40% boost over what the Necrons have on the table. So, what do I want to use for the Necron forces? That's what I thought I'd actually go through today. Now, I'm going to say I'm using the Necron 8th edition Codex. Unfortunately, I don't have this book as a PDF, and it's quite expensive to purchase from GW. It's literally, in Australia, the PDF is 1 cent less than the physical book. And while I normally wouldn't mind buying a PDF for the purposes of this exercise, with 9th edition coming out, it does seem rather redundant to buy a book which is going to be outdated soon when I've already got a physical copy right here. So I apologize if I don't put up the stats as we talk about these units, but I'll try and talk through what I'm considering, what its sort of field role is. Now, also let me caveat too that I am not a long-term Necron player. I've literally played one game as Necrons of the tabletop war game. I've watched quite a bit, and obviously there's more and more Necron battles coming out right now with 9th edition coming out and people getting ready for that. But I would not call myself a Necron expert. So I would suggest if you're watching this and you do like Necrons, you know them very well, and you want to make comments on YouTube about what my choices were like, please feel free to do that. Once again, I'm not looking for an optimal tournament list designed to trounce my opponent. I'm looking for something which is narrative, which fits with what I wanted to have on the table and works with what I was actually talking about. Now, I'll just quickly allude as well, because we've seen in the course of the game so far a couple of named Necron, at least one named Necron. So I'll call out the fact that Ozcan the Codifier, or Ozcan the Transmogrifier, or Ozcan the Alchemist, as he's been known in the game, is actually from the Deathwatch book, The Outer Reach. So the Necrons do exist within the Jericho Reach. So here we've got Ozcan, our Cryptek. So he will definitely be one of the forces we put onto the field. And also we've got, if we come back up here, Pharaon Armontek, who'll be our Necron Lord, once again from the outer reaches of the Jericho Reach. So, yeah, we're certainly incorporating these characters from the material into our battlefield. So let me bring up Battlescribe. So if you're not familiar, Battlescribe, sorry, I've done the wrong thing. I want to bring up TTS. There we go. Let's go back to TTS. Seamless. There we go. So TTS we use for going through the battles on the table. The fans have created all these models. Some of them have come from things like Dawn of War. Some have been scanned from the actual models using 3D scanners. Some have been painstakingly created in things like Blender. So I just want to, without knowing who did it, I want to thank all of the people that went to all this excellent work to create these Necron models. Now, I'll say I haven't yet worked out what I'm doing in terms of the what do they call their dynasty rules. There is a dynasty established in the Deathwatch. It doesn't have its own. It doesn't match any of the dynasties in the Necron Codex, and I don't think that Necrons had a build your own dynasty rule set done in Psychic Awakening. So I'll just pick one of the dynasties that I think the rule set of fits what I'm going for with the dynasty from Deathwatch as well. Okay, let's start off with HQ choices, what I'm considering. And we'll just scrolling up here to the HQ choices. Now, Necrons have a lot of named characters. So we've got Anrakia the Traveller, we've got Eliminator Zeros, we've got Imhotep the Stormlord. I'm not using any of these named characters. Once again, I'm only going to be using standard forces. I might give them the names of things that appear in Deathwatch. So say, for example, we know we're going to have a Cryptek called Ozcan the Alchemist, or Ozcan the Codifier. So Cryptek is an HQ choice. It's 5 power level as a base. Now, the original Crypt Tech with these models here, originally I think just a resin or metal model, and they have the option of coming with a Chronometron. Chronometrons allow friendly models within 3 inches to get a 5+ or 5+ invulnerable save against ranged weapons only. Then when Forgebane came out, this new model arrived of the Crypt Tech, which has a Canoptic Cloak. And this Canoptic Cloak gives it a fly speed of 10, and also allows you to one model per turn within 3 inches of this model that has the living metal rule, which allows them to heal 1 wound per turn, actually heals D3, and that can be used on itself as well. So for the purposes of OzCan, I am thinking of just using the standard Crypt Tech, probably with the Chronometron as well, just to give it some extra interest, because once again, the power level doesn't change if you include the Chronometron or not, because we're not playing in points. In points, it would cost extra, but not in power level. So that'll be, so actually, let's go over to Battlescribe first off. And Battlescribe is our list building tool. And I am just going to say, okay, so we want to have 150 power level total, maximum. And I'm going to add in, first off, a Necron battalion. So this would be 100 power level worth. And let's also put in, I'm thinking for the secondary force that could be eliminated by player actions to include some destroyers. Now, destroyers are normally fast attack, and there's some other cool stuff in fast attack as well. So maybe we make this an outrider detachment. We can change this as necessary, but I'll start for the moment with a battalion and an outrider. Now, if you're familiar with 8th edition, I just realized that you can't actually see this on OBS because it's a separate window. My bad. So let me trigger this. Okay, so now you can see that. So you can see here I've got a battalion and a outrider. So a battalion requires a minimum of 2 HQs and 3 troops, and an outrider requires a minimum of 1 HQ and 3 fast attack. Now, with the change from 8th to 9th, in 8th edition, you were rewarded for taking more detachments. So as you can see here, battalion gains +5 CP or command points. Outrider gains +1 CP or command points. So that gives you 6 CP on top of your base number, which is 5 currently. So that would bring you 11 CP, which can be used for things like re-rolls, activating special abilities. This has changed now with 9th edition. You are effectively penalized now for taking multiple detachments in that each detachment costs you CP. So at a standard size game, you start with 12 CP and you effectively spend these on bringing in detachments. Now, the detachment that your warlord sits in does not count or doesn't have its CP cost. So normally, if we were to have a battalion with its CP cost, but the warlord's in there, that would cost nothing. So if it was just that battalion, you get your full CP. So in this particular case, if the players do wipe out the second detachment, and that doesn't then appear on the board, the Necrons will actually have more command points and therefore more rerolls, but once again, less forces. So it does end up with the slight balancing mechanic, even though it's designed to be imbalanced. So let's say we know that regardless of what happens in the space battle, we want to have OzCan on the field. So in our HQs, let's drop in a Crypt Tech. So we know he's going to have the Chronometron instead of the Crypt Tech Cloak. And we can actually, I think you can actually do this. You can put him in and say it's OzCan, the Codifier. Can't type tonight. There we go. Okay, so there we go. We've got our Crypt Tech in there. So we still need a second HQ for this battalion. So for this purpose, we're going to be talking about our Lord, we mentioned before, who was, what was his name? Armored Tech. So if I go back to TTS for a moment, are we talking about this? So still in the HQs part, all these things over here, everything we're looking at right now on the screen, this is all Lord options. So there's quite a bit, as you can see. So why is this? There are, let me see, 4 different things that could count as a lord in terms of data sheets. The first one is a Catacomb command barge. So if I come along to the right here, you'll see all these big things here are Catacomb command barges. Why are there so many? Because they have different weapon options, whether it's a lord or an overlord, for example. All these things change what could be on there. Now, I really, really like the command barge. I'm not going to use it in this battle, though. And my reasoning is that while it's cool, it is very much a very obvious thing, a very powerful thing. I mean, first off, so it's less than 10 wounds, which means you can't target unless it's the closest thing. It does count as a character. It doesn't have an invulnerable save. So in many ways, it's targeted like a vehicle when you can. It tends to draw things like las cannon shots into it or the like. It's toughness 6, 8 wounds, but its real failing, I said, is that lack of an invulnerable save. I would rather probably have Lord be on foot, which really brings us down then to Lords, Overlords, and Destroy Lords. So Destroyers are sort of these Necron Centauride-like things that have down to the waist is a Necron humanoid, and then a hover platform beneath that. Once again, pretty cool. But what I thought is that's not how NPC was shown. If I go back to Acrobat for a second, you'll see what I mean. As you can see, he does not. He has legs, so therefore he should be a lord on foot in my belief. And so my inclination is to leave him as either a lord or an overlord, depending on the number of points I'm going to use. So, for example, a lord is power level 5, overlord is power level 6. The difference, they have basically similar stat block. The overlord has a 2+ weapon skill and ballistic skill. And more importantly, the overlord has the phase shifter ability, which gives them a 4+ invulnerable save. So my real inclination is to give, is to make our warlord this overlord, who is actually here not really effectively what Ozcan has been doing is not in the knowledge of his lord. Lord has come for other reasons, which I won't go into because it is a bit of a spoiler. So let's go back to Battle Scribe and let's put in an overlord. Okay, so we'll give him a resurrection orb. So the resurrection orb allows him to raise more Necrons that die around him. And of course, once again, if you add this in, his power level still 6, doesn't change. So then it comes down to what weapon is he going to use. He's got a few options there. So if we go through, the Staff of Light can be fired in both. It can be shot and it's also used in melee. So when it's shot, it's 12-inch, assault 3, strength 5, AP -2. In melee, it's a strength 5, AP -2 as well. So quite versatile. Everything else is melee only. So the Hyperface Sword is strength 6, AP -3. The Void Blade is strength 5, AP -3, but it gives extra attack, 4 attacks total. Void Scythe is strength 10, AP -4, 3 damage. But it's -1 on the attack roll. So it's sort of like the Necron equivalent of Thunderhammer. And the War Scythe is strength 7, AP -4, damage 2. So the real question is whether we think that this guy is going to be running over and punching tanks, or if he's going to wade into infantry. Let's have a look just quickly at the character in Deathwatch and see what he actually wields in Deathwatch. Has he got stats? Maybe he doesn't. He hasn't got stats. Fantastic. Unless he's further down. No, another Cryptek. No, okay, so we can make him whatever we want to make him. All right, so let's go back to Battle Scribe and let's leave him the Staff of Light. He's going to be only attacking on strength 5, but unless we just will have something else attack tanks, and we'll focus him on doing the more of the infantry forces, or I mean even Marines. He's going to be hitting. He's going to be wounding on 3s, hitting on 2s, so not too bad. And he buffs infantry with his My Will Be Done too, so he's more of a force multiplier. Okay, so that ticks off for our battalion. We've cleared our HQ requirements, so now we just need to do our troops. Now, while we're talking about HQs as well, though, I thought for the Outrider detachment, I would like to include a Destroyer Lord who may or may not make it to the board. So let's whack in a Destroyer Lord down here. Go back and make our Overlord our Warlord. And our Destroyer Lord. Let's see, we'll give him the Resurrection Orb as well, so he can then heal troops near him. And now, Destroyer Lords don't have a ranged weapon by default attached to them. So let's leave him with a Staff of Light as well. That way he can also have a ranged attack while he's moving across the board with these other destroyers. So that should then clear out the HQ requirement, for our second detachment. All right, so we're at 11 of 100. And we're at 7 of 50, so we're doing pretty well. Okay, now we're going to do some troops for our main force. So let's look at what Necron troops look like. Okay, troops down here. Couple of options. Most common one, Necron Warriors. Really standard. They have a Gauss Flayer, which is strength 4, AP -1, so rapid fire 1. Very much like a bolt gun, just with AP -1. And they're living metal, so they can be reanimated. So they reanimate, which means that every turn you roll for each dead one to see if it comes back, unless the whole unit's wiped. Then you've got Immortals. Immortals are also a troop choice. They use Gauss Blasters, which are strength 5, AP -2, so they wound Marines and Terminators, etc. on 3s. They wound tanks still on 5s. They can even wound a Land Raider on 5, whereas a regular Necron Warrior is wounding a Land Raider on a 6. They can choose to swap to Tesla Carbines, which are Assault 2, Strength 5, but no AP. The advantage of the Tesla Carbines is that any hit roll of 6 counts as 3 hits rather than 1. Which is much of a muchness to me. I'd rather have the higher AP personally. Now, in terms of power level, Necron Warriors are 6 power level for 10 guys. And Immortals are 4 power level for 5 guys. I do think that the 9th edition rules award minimum squad size more than larger squads, just the way that things like the new unit coherency rules work, along with morale and battle shock. So my inclination is to go for smaller 5-man squads over 10-man squads. I do need to include 3 troops into this army. So my inclination is to probably do either 1 Warriors and 2 Immortals, or 2 Warriors and 1 Immortals. Let's do the 1 Warriors and 2 Immortals to start off with, because that gives me more power level still to spend, although less physical models on the board. So we'll go to Battle Scribe, and we'll put in 1 Necron Warriors, 10 guys, and we'll put in Immortals, lead them with the Gauss Blasters, duplicate that. There you go, so now we're up to 25. So we've done a quarter of our power level, and that now ticks off our troops. So literally, other than the dynasty choice, this battalion detachment is now legal. But we can add more to it. So, and we still need to do some fast attack options for the Outrider detachment to make that one legal. But we've got more points to spend. So let's look back at TTS and talk through a few other Necron options. Okay, so after troop choices, we've then got elites. And with most armies, there's usually a lot of elites. So going through elites, we've got Lich Guard. So Lich Guard are primarily a melee-focused Necron force. They don't have ranged weapons at all. They come with hyperphase swords, they come with the war sides by default, which are a strength 7, AP -4, flat 2 damage. So really good for taking on things like Terminators, any sort of 2-win models. So they're great against Primaris models, for example. And they can then choose to swap that for hyperphase swords and dispersion shields. And the hyperphase sword is strength 6, AP -3, flat 1 damage. And the dispersion shield gives them 4+ invulnerable. They're normally a 3+ regular save. So they're not too bad, other than the fact they've got no range. It really comes down to whether you're the sort of person that wants to march Necrons across the board into melee combat, or whether you treat them more like a gunline army, because certainly what they don't have is speed. They're a 5-inch move, so they're slower than regular Marines, slower than Imperial Guard. They just take a bit longer to foot slog it across the board. Then you've got Death Marks. So Death Marks carry Synaptic Disintegrators, which are rapid-fire, 1-weapon, strength 4. They're basically snipers. They can target characters even if they aren't the closest unit, and would, like with most sniper rifles, on a wound roll of 6, they do a mortal wound. The main difference from these and regular snipers is they're rapid-fire weapons rather than heavy weapons, so they can move and shoot without penalty, but they are limited to 24-inch range, and they only get the rapid-fire bonus at 12-inch range as well to fire twice. They can also deploy after setup with the Hunters from the Hyperspace, or Hunters from Hyperspace rule. With that being said, the way reserves work in 9th edition is a bit different, so I'll probably... They're only 5 paddle. I might steer clear of these guys, only because in a narrative campaign battle, character hunting, especially from like the GM point of view, is probably a bit foul. I'd rather look at, do the players throw characters, whether they're own PCs or NPCs, into harm's way, rather than pick them out from a defensive line, maliciously with snipers, basically. So I probably won't use Death Marks, but I'm just going through the options. Next, we've got Flayed Ones. Flayed Ones are a particular type of Necron which are subject to a code infection, where they like to dress themselves in the flesh of their dead enemies. They don't fit with the particular Necron force I'm working with, so from a purely narrative point of view, I'm leaving them out. But effectively what they do in the rules of the game is they deplete the morale of troops they're near because they're covered in their friend's flesh. Then we have Triarch Praetorians, which should be here. So Praetorians are like a leader caste without actually being the true leaders as such. They're like effectively they were like the nobles rather than the actual lords of the Necrons before they were transmuted from flesh into metal. So they have a choice of either, they come by default with a Rod of Covenant, which is a weapon which has both a shooting attack at strength 5 AP -3, and also a melee attack at strength 5 AP -3. Or else they can swap that for a Particle Caster and Void Blade. So the Particle Caster is a strength 6 AP 0, and the Void Blade gives them strength 5 AP -3 and 1 additional attack, 2 attacks base. If I'm going to use these guys, I'd probably prefer to use the Rod of Covenant. I mean, the range is the same, but I think the AP -3 is more valuable than the 1 additional strength at AP 0. Although it is pistol, which means you can fire it in melee combat as an option. It's a choice. They're completely immune to morale checks as well. That being said, I mean, all Necrons have really high leadership, so they very rarely run away. Then you've got Triarch Stalkers, which are these big things here. Same guys, just on these big sort of multi-limbed robots. What do they have? They have a Heat Ray, which can be either fired dispersed for heavy 2d6, strength 5, AP -1, but it works like a flamer, auto hits. Or they can be focused, which is heavy 2, strength 8, AP -4. It works like a melter when you're within half range, roll damage twice and take the best result. So effectively, it can either be a heavy flamer or a standard melter. Not bad. They also have particle shredders. So they have to replace the Heat Ray with a particle shredder and twin heavy Gauss cannon as an option. Where the particle shredder is strength 7, AP -1, D3 damage, and the twin heavy Gauss cannon is heavy 2, strength 9, AP -4. So that's more like a las cannon, or actually like a Eldar Bright Lance with its AP -4. Plus, in melee combat, they're actually strength 7, AP -1, D3 damage. It's quite nice. They're 8 power level each, though. I consider it anyway. And then finally, you've got these two Catan shards. Once again, for narrative reasons I won't go into, it is not at all appropriate for me to attach Catan shards to this particular army, so I'll leave that out. So I'm not going to pick something straight away, but there are a few things I'm considering in the elites force as well. All right, let's talk about fast attack up here. So fast attack has one of my favorite units, which are the Canoptic Wraiths. They are such a horrible unit to play against and a fun unit to play as. So a standard squad is 3 Canoptic Wraiths. By default, they only have a melee weapon, which is their Vicious Claws, which is strength 6, AP -2, flat 2 damage. But you can equip them with either a Particle Caster, which is strength 6, AP 0, with a Transdimensional Beamer, which is strength 4, AP -3, which also has mortal wounds on 6s, or with Whip Coils, which are an enhanced melee version, which is strength 6, AP -2, flat 2 damage. But when you have those, when the model with them is slain, it can still attack in that turn, even if it hasn't attacked yet. So it's like an ability to have an extra attack. What I like most about Canoptic Wraiths is the fact they have a 3+ invulnerable save to everything. And they have 3 wounds each, which makes a unit of 3 really annoying to get rid of. With a toughness of 5, 3 wounds, and 3+ invulnerable save, they are a stubborn force to remove. And I will definitely be including, in fact, I'm going to go and do that right away. Let's go into Battle Scribe. And in fast attack, this will go with the main force. I don't want to do this in the backup force, although I could add more, but let's put in Canoptic Wraiths. All right, do I want to give them... Let's give them a ranged weapon as well. I don't want to give them the Transdimensional Beamer because it's heavy, so let's give them Particle Casters. So 3 with Particle Casters. There we go. Okay, let's go back to TTS. All right, next we have Canoptic Scarabs. These are... They're sort of like Nurglings, I find, for Demons of Nurgle. Effectively, they are a relatively weak base, but with 3 wounds each, they make for a really great screening force. So a single unit could be 3, 6, or 9. They only have a melee attack, which is strength 3, AP 0, 1 damage. But it always wounds on them no worse than a 5+. So they can't be reduced. They can even wound knights on a 5+ with their strength 3. Which is nice, but I mean, at the end of the day, what they are better for is screening for characters. Because you can have up to 9 of them with 3 wounds each. There's 27 wounds you've got to burn through before you can allocate attacks to the character standing behind them. So, and they're only 2 power level for 3, 4 power level for 6, or 8 power level. 6 power level for 9. So let's put some of those in, just to screen our heroes. So put in Canoptic Scarabs. We'll make it a unit of 6. So for 4 power level. So how are we doing now? We're at 38 power level. Still plenty of room to go. Okay, so let's go back to TTS. Okay, then we have Tomb Blades. So Tomb Blades are along here. These are these sort of flying Necrons in these sort of hover bike wheel things. By default, they come with 2 Gauss Blasters, which is standard strength 5 AP -2, rapid fire 1, sorry. They can swap that for either 2 Tesla Carbines, which are strength 5 AP 0, hit rolls of 6+, course 3 hit rolls instead of 1. Or they can go for Particle Beamers, which are strength 6 AP 0. That's alright. Once again, these guys have a invulnerable save of 3+, but only 2 wounds. I'll think about that one. I'll come back to that. Then we have Destroyers. So I mentioned before, Destroyers are these central rod-like things. So by default, they come with, well, it's one model per purchase, but they can be units of up to 6. And if you have at least 3 models, then you can upgrade one of them to a heavy destroyer. So standard destroyers have Gauss cannons, strength 6, AP -3, D3 damage. And the heavy destroyers have heavy Gauss cannons, which is strength 9, AP -4, D6. So once again, those bright lance type weapons. They can re-roll hit rolls of 1, and they can move and fire weapons without penalty as well, which either applies in 9th edition, because in 9th edition they're not a vehicle, they're still infantry, whereas vehicles in 9th edition can move and fire without penalty. These guys, well, normal things like this would normally get it, but these guys, their repulsive platform rule means they can ignore it. So these are the guys I want to be putting into the secondary detachment as additional forces. So let's go and say, let's go back to Battle Scribe. Okay, so for our secondary force, let's put in 2 squads of destroyers. Okay, with each squad, let's bring it up to the minimum required to get a heavy destroyer, which is 3. So we still need at least another fast attack to make this a proper outrider. So let's put in some more Wraiths into this unit as well, and once again with them particle casters. So if the second group lands, they're going to have to deal with 6 Wraiths rather than just 3. Okay, so now that one there is done except for the dynasty choice, but we still need to have another 16 points worth for that secondary detachment. All right, back to TTS. All right, so now we're on to heavy support choices. So it's come down to heavy support, which there is quite a bit. So first off, we've got heavy destroyers, obviously already been mentioned. They can be purchased separately as a heavy support choice. We've got these Canoptic spiders. These are an interesting unit. They come by default with automation claws, which are a melee only weapon, but you can give them 2 particle beamers. They can also take a gloom prison, which allows them to deny psychic powers. So they're the only thing outside of Catan which can actually do anything in the psychic phase in terms of denying powers. And they also have a rule called Scarab Hive, which allows them to effectively regenerate dead Scarab bases within a certain range as well. They're 4 power level each, as in per single thing. I'll keep in mind, probably not on the top of my wish list right now, but it is something that is there for heavy support. Okay, next we have the Monolith. Now, the Monolith is a thing I really like, even though they are underwhelming in 8th edition. There was actually a recent poll, I think, on Spiky Bits over which was the worst 8th edition model, and I think that the Monolith either won it or came second in terms of what was the worst model. With that being said, I quite like it. They are stubborn to get off the board, being toughness 8 and 20 wounds. They're actually harder to delete than a Land Raider is, and they've got living metal, so they regenerate 1 wound per turn. They have 2 weapons. They have they have 5 weapons. They have a single Gauss Flux Arc, which is a heavy 3, strength 5. They have 4 of those, like 4 Gauss Flux Arcs. So effectively, they're firing 12 shots, strength 5 AP -2, 1 damage. And they've got a single particle whip, which is heavy 6, 8 strength, -2 AP, D3 damage. But it's more their special rules make it interesting. First off, they can be set up in reserve and use their death descending rule. The only thing that's weird about these things is that whereas most things that get deployed as a reserve have to be done within 9 or no more than 9 or no less than 9 inches away from an enemy, these things need to be 12 inches away, and they've got a really huge base. You can see just the size of this model compared to the heavy destroyer. So I've actually had games where these things literally cannot deploy because the board control of the opponent has meant that there's literally been no space on the board. There's been room to drop one down. And come 4th turn, too bad. That thing's lost because it never actually made it down. I would like to put one of these in, I'm going to put one of these into my army. I am definitely going to have it hang back and reappear or appear in a subsequent turn. And I'll see if the players choose to try and play strategically to deny it a landing spot and effectively eliminate 19 power level worth of enemy in a, well, not easy, but in a different way. What I love about this thing is its Portal of Exile rule, which is a little green gateway down here. When you charge this thing in melee combat, you roll a dice. On a 4+ by default, the charging unit takes D6 mortal wounds as they basically get sucked into the portal into a pocket dimension somewhere else, which is pretty cool. You can use it as a sort of transport. Effectively, its Eternity Gate rule allows you to set up forces with it in reserve and then deploy them from its base. And when they are deployed out as well, they can appear within 3 inches of this model, but no closer than 1 inch to enemy models. So it can give you a very easy charge. If it arrives, flies close, disgorges its troops, and then they charge a very short distance. But it's a very expensive way to do that. But it is an option there. And being a vehicle, they do explode as well. But I like it. It's not great from a rules point of view, but I think the fluff in it's fantastic. So I'm going to put a monolith into my force. And I welcome all criticism. So heavy support, monolith, look at that, 300 points, and no options. Nothing to choose, just you got it, it's done. Okay, so back to TTS. Okay, so now we have the Annihilation Barge. So the Annihilation Barge is effectively the same thing as the Command Barge, just with bigger weapons as opposed to having a commander on it. So it comes by default with a Gauss cannon and a twin Tesla destructor. So the Gauss cannon's heavy 3, strength 6, AP -3, D3 damage, and the twin Tesla destructor is assault 8, strength 7, AP 0, 1 damage. So yeah, still, it's like a heavy infantry / light vehicle attack. It doesn't have, I mean, the D3 damage is okay, but it's only got D3 damage on the strength 6 weapon. You can swap its Gauss cannon for a Tesla cannon, where you lose the AP -3 and the D3 damage, but hit rolls of 6 count as 3, and it's assault only, not heavy. This model's got quantum shielding. It's one of the first models that does. So anything with quantum shielding as a rule, where it takes a multi-damage hit, you roll a dice. If it is less than the amount of damage rolled, the damage is negated. So it's all well and good someone to roll 6 on a las cannon strike, but if all you have to do is roll a 5 or less, and suddenly that whole hit's negated. Yeah, I'd be inclined to probably include maybe one of these or 2 of these, or potentially the next option, which is the Doomsday Arc. And the Doomsday Arc here is effectively one of the better things that Necrons have when it comes to anti-tank. So they're equipped with a Doomsday Cannon and 2 Gauss Flare arrays. The Doomsday Cannon is either fired on low power, where it's heavy D6, strength 8, AP -2, D3 damage, and or fire on high power, where it is heavy D6, strength 10, AP -5, D6 damage, and it's 72-inch range, but you cannot fire it on high power unless the arc remains stationary in its preceding turn. So I think I would definitely include one of these. They're 10 power level, and they are a total bullet magnet because they are the biggest threat to any sort of tanks that the enemy has. But yeah, so I think I need to include at least one of these, maybe even 2. Depends on what I think the players will do in terms of tank forces. But let's go and see where we stand. So, in fact, what I'll do, let's put one into the main detachment. And let's put one into the secondary detachment. So they could face up to 2, which only leaves now 6 power level in the secondary detachment, and we've still got 33 left in the main detachment. That's right, there's still more to do. So go back to TTS. Okay, so we covered the Doomsday Arc. That leaves Transcendent Catan, once again, not touching Catan for this force. In our dedicated transports, you've got the Ghost Arc. The Ghost Arc is effectively the transport for Necron forces. what it does that's quite nice is it's got the repair barge rule, which means if it's close by your forces, it improves their reanimation protocols. So with that being said, I haven't got a lot of forces so far that have reanimation protocols, like definitely the warriors and the immortals do. But probably I want to get some more, go back and choose things like Lich Guard or Praetorians or Death Marks to utilize this. But I think I will put a Ghost Arc into the army, main army. So let's put in a Ghost Arc. Where'd you go? It's on the Ghost Arc. Okay, no choices right there. So we're up to, got 25 power level left in that one. Okay, that then leaves, beyond that, we've still got Lords of War, is it? Oh, no, we've got Flyers, because Flyers. So 2 Flyers to worry about here. We've got the Doom Scythe at the back here. The Doom Scythe is basically your standard fighter. So it's got 2 weapons. It's got a Death Ray, which is strength 10, AP minus 4, D6. So once again, very good anti-tank. And it's got 2 Tesla Destructors, which are Assault 4, strength 7, AP 0, and attack rolls of 6 plus, course 3 hits. So definitely include one of these. They are supersonic, so they're hard to hit. The other one is the Night Scythe. The Night Scythe only has the Tesla Destructor. It loses the Death Ray. But what it does have is Invasion Beams, which allows you to effectively shoot models onto the board with teleporters, which is a bit different in 9th edition. So I'm just going to stick with the Doom Scythe for 11 power level. So we'll put one of those in. I do like to run multi-flyer army lists, but I think for the purpose of this one, I don't want to overdo it. So I'm just going to put in the Doom Scythe for now. Okay, no options there. So we've got 14 power level left for that main force. All right. So then there are fortifications. Fortifications are the Obelisk and the Tesseract Vault. Not going to touch those for this one. It's not no point in this battle. And that is everything in the standard Necron list. So I just need to find a little bit more for both forces. So I spoke about, I'm going to put in a second Necron warrior group only because that gives us some more forces that need to be run through in terms of just removing bodies from the field. So put in more Necron warriors. Okay, that leaves us with 8. I can put more Necron warriors into the second group, and that would then cover that one off as a total of 50 anyway. Let me come back to that. What else can I do that's worth 6? I could make the destroyers even more. So I'm going to do that. Let's make these 1, 2, 3. I know I've done too much. All right. Oh, wow, okay. That's right. They're 3 each. Okay. All right. So our right attachment is the Destroyer Lord, 3 Wraiths, 6 Destroyers plus 2 Heavy Destroyers, and a Doomsday Arc. And then for the main force, we've still got 8 left. So I feel like I want to put in some more guys that are on foot to make use of the animation protocols. So for 8 points, I could do a Lich Guard group. I could do Triarch Praetorians. I could do Lich Guard and I could put them in the monolith and then actually get them in close. But then the monolith's so hard to deep strike because of the 12-inch radius. Or I put an Annihilation Barge in. The question is whether I want to have another tank or more guys. My inclination is more guys. Nothing's worth 3, or else I'd probably include. Let's do some Lich Guard. Let's give them some melee combatants to worry about. So now the question is whether we do the Hyperphase Swords or the War Sides. So once again, War Sides, strength 7, AP minus 4, 2 damage. Or we go for What are their base? Because it gives them a 4+ invulnerable, but their base save is what? Base save is 3+. I'm going to live with the war sides. Okay, so we now have 100 PL on the main list and 150 and 50 on that, so 150 total. Feels, not being a Necron player, like a fluffy list to play. Now, I want to mention one more thing as well. Those of you that are 40k familiar might be aware of these thing called Necron Pariahs. I mentioned them previously on the show. Necron Pariahs were a thing that was available, not available, it was in Dawn of War 1. And effectively they were an experiment by the Necrons to try and pull humans into, pull humans into the Necron bodies. And they focused on using people with the Pariah gene, which were effectively psychic blanks. Now, this is relevant to what is happening on Regina 4 in ways that will become obvious pretty quickly if it is not already. And there are no 8th edition rules for these. They did appear in one of the older codexes. Yeah, Necron 3rd edition. And they're mentioned only in Necron 7th edition. But they haven't had rules for a long time. I am going to bring these into my game. I may put them on the field. They may not be in this battle. They may be in a separate sort of thing. They utilize these weapons that are a combination of a war scythe and gas blaster. So that's quite interesting to do. We just call it that weapon and then give it the stats for shooting of a gas blaster and for melee of a war scythe. And then I'll probably just copy the abilities of a Calidus assassin, or Calix. The one that stops psychic powers, and just give them that ability to effectively limit psychic powers in the same way as it's Calixis assassins. Calidus are the ones that use polymorphine. So to actually give them that same ability to block psychic powers. And that I may end up using them in the battle. It depends really on what happens when the group decides to actually explore the caverns beneath the Anvil of War. So let's recap. So we have the group has about 160 power level currently worth of Sororitas, Adeptus Mechanicus, Astra Militarum, and Space Marines. They've got a couple of ships at their disposal. They've got time to prepare. They've got time to get more. They've got time to get factions on side, or blow it all away seeking profit, which profit does still help because it gets them more Astra Militarum. The Necrons are coming. They've got multiple ships, of which the group will probably fight one of the frigate or raider class ships. If they defeat it, that takes 50 points out of the ground combat. We've got forces worked out for the Necrons for the ground combat. Everything is obviously still subject to change, so if you've got further ideas, once again, feel free to point them out. Otherwise, I think we're pretty ready to go. We're still probably several sessions away from this point, but I just thought we missed 2 weeks. We had a week without a show, a week with a show, a week without a show. So I wanted to record something extra just to sort of give you some idea on what I'm working on. Now, I will also say, as a final thing, for this upcoming battle, we're doing it a bit differently to what was done previously in Dark Inquisition. So I feel there might be people out there in the audience who are not that interested in the war game side of things. So I want to basically give 3 ways to consume this. One way is that we will record the full battle, not with a live audience. We'll record it on the side, and we will make the full battle completely available to you to check out and follow every single dice roll, every model lost, every cry of anguish from the PCs as I wipe out one of their forces. We will do a version which will be edited down to a 30 to 40 minute action notes. These are the big rolls. These are the major things that happened. Almost like a commentated event. I'll go through an edit afterwards and commentate what's going on and sort of give you a shorter blow-by-blow of what's actually gone on. And the third thing will be that as part of the regular narrative side of the game, we will narrate the narrative outcomes of the battle. We won't just say that, okay, guys, we were role-playing up to this point, then we went away and did a war game, you didn't watch it, and you come back and everyone talks about what's happened without you knowing about it. We will still resolve those things from a narrative scope if all you want to see is the character stuff. And if you are one of those people, I'm really sorry you've just watched an hour and a quarter of me rambling about the war game. When clearly that's not your thing, but those will be the options available to you anyway when the time comes. But we're still, let's see, we're like 14 episodes in now. We're probably still 7 to 8 episodes away from needing to close this out, but at least now we've got some progress towards what that end game will look like. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this. Hope it's given you some insight. Any questions, feel free to put them onto the YouTube channel. You can also follow me at Grimdark Podcasts. So on Twitter at Grimdark Podcast or at www.grimdarkpodcast.com, where I do a 40k RPG podcast from time to time, depending upon how readily I can get my co-host together. Anyway, I have been Grimdark James. You have been an awesome audience, and once again, support Arthur's channel, like and subscribe, smash that like button, and ring that bell. Check out Arthur's Patreon, Arthur's Discord, and of course the live shows on Twitch, of which this show is live every Saturday at 8 p.m. Eastern. Anyway, thank you once again, and I will catch you next time around.